They mocked the cleaner for wearing an old dress to the party, but the heir said you are one of a kind. Melissa Johnson held the crumpled invitation with trembling hands as she looked at herself in the cracked mirror of her small room. The beige dress was the only one she owned, carefully mended at the seams that had come loose years ago. That's when she heard Mrs. Margaret's shrill voice echoing through the mansion's hallways. "What do you mean, she's going to the party? A mere cleaner at the Anderson family's gala?" "Ma'am, it was Nathan himself who insisted," replied Dorothy, the housekeeper, in a low voice. "He said all employees who have worked here for more than 5 years should be invited." Melissa took a deep breath. She knew she shouldn't go. She knew she would be humiliated. But something inside her, a force she couldn't explain, pushed her toward that party. Maybe it was the memory of the girl who had once dreamed of attending places like this. Maybe it was just stubbornness. 3 hours later, she was standing at the entrance to the mansion's golden ballroom, watching elegant ladies in designer dresses and men in tuxedos circulate with champagne glasses. The contrast was striking. Her simple dress, her worn-out sandals, her plainly combed hair. The first laughs started quietly, almost whispers. Melissa felt her face heat up when she realized she was being watched. A group of guests near the dessert table made no effort to hide their mean comments. "Look how cute," murmured a platinum-haired lady. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to the kitchen." "Poor thing. Must have thought she was going to a costume party," added another, provoking a wave of suppressed giggles. Melissa lowered her eyes and took a step toward the exit. It had been a mistake, a terrible mistake. But when she looked up again, she found Nathan Anderson standing right in front of her. "Do you need something, Mum?" he asked with a gentle smile she had never seen before in 2 years of working in that house. I just came to deliver this," she lied, showing some random paper she had in her pocket. "The housekeeper asked me to." Nathan narrowed his eyes, as if trying to figure something out. There was something in the way she spoke, in the way she carried herself, that sparked his curiosity. She wasn't just a cleaner following orders. There was a natural elegance in her gestures, an intelligence in her gaze that contrasted with the simplicity of her clothes. "Are you sure? Because it looks to me like you're dressed for a party," he said, completely ignoring the indignant looks from the other guests. At that moment, Margaret Anderson approached with determined steps. The family matriarch wore a navy blue hand-embroidered dress and an expression of deep displeasure. "Nathan, darling, come meet Senator Thompson's daughter," she said, subtly pulling her grandson's arm. "Melissa, you may leave now. Thank you for the document." But Nathan didn't move. He kept looking at Melissa with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Actually, Grandma, I'd like the lady to stay," he said, addressing Melissa. After all employees were invited, weren't they? The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa felt every pair of eyes in the ballroom focused on her. The embarrassment was almost physical, a pain in her chest that made her want to disappear. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. "Of course," replied Margaret with a forced smile. "But I believe she has already completed her task and must have other things to do." "No, Grandma, she doesn't," Nathan replied, surprising everyone with the firmness in his voice. "It's Saturday night. Melissa, would you care for a glass of champagne?" Melissa looked around. The expressions varied between shocked and amused, as if they were watching a bizarre spectacle. She wanted to say no, she wanted to run away, but something in Nathan's voice reassured her. I don't know if—" "Please," he insisted, already signaling to a waiter. "Consider it a thank you for the excellent work you do here in the house." The glass reached Melissa's hands before she could protest. The golden liquid shimmered under the light of the chandelier, and she wondered if she had ever in her life touched anything so expensive. "Nathan, I need to speak with you," said Mrs. Margaret through her teeth, "in private." "Of course, Grandma, but later," he replied, without taking his eyes off Melissa. "Right now I want to know more about our guest. Melissa, how long have you worked here?" 2.5 years, sir," she replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "And before that?" Melissa hesitated. There was so much she couldn't tell, So much past that needed to stay buried. I worked in other houses, general cleaning. Interesting, said Nathan, tilting his head slightly. And how far did you go in school? The question took Melissa by surprise. Few employers were interested in that kind of information about their staff. High school diploma, she replied, carefully omitting the 3 years of college she had dropped out of. Nathan nodded slowly, as if each answer confirmed something he already suspected. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't identify but that intrigued him deeply. "What kind of music do you like?" he continued, ignoring the whispers around them. "Nathan!" Mrs. Margaret's voice came out louder than intended. "Enough of this pointless conversation. We have important guests waiting." But it was at that moment that something unexpected happened. One of the women who had mocked Melissa approached the group, clearly annoyed by the attention the cleaner was receiving. "My dear Nathan," she said with a poisonous smile, "I think it's adorable how concerned you are with the staff, but wouldn't she be more comfortable in the kitchen, with people of her own level?" The silence that followed was different from before. This one was heavy, charged with a tension that seemed to electrify the air. Nathan turned slowly to the woman, and Melissa had never seen such a serious expression on his face. "Mrs. Victoria," he said, with a calm that even frightened Melissa, "you have just demonstrated exactly why she is the only genuine person in this room." The words echoed through the space like a bomb. Conversations stopped. Glasses froze in mid-air. All eyes turned to the small group in the center of the room. "How dare you—" began Mrs. Victoria. "You want to know what I see when I look at her?" continued Nathan, pointing at Melissa. "I see someone who works with dignity, who doesn't need to belittle anyone to feel important, who treats every person with respect, regardless of their social standing." Melissa felt her face burning. It was too much attention, too much exposure. She just wanted to disappear. "Nathan, stop this immediately," ordered Mrs. Margaret, but her grandson continued. "And do you know what I see when I look at you?" His voice was now audible to the entire room. "I see people who need to humiliate others to feel superior, people who confuse money with character." "How dare you speak to us like that?" exploded Mrs. Victoria. "We are your guests." "And she has been our employee for over 2 years, Nathan shot back. "She has taken care of our home, our family, with dedication. She deserves more respect than any of you have shown tonight." Melissa couldn't take it anymore. The situation had become too big, too embarrassing. She placed the full glass on a nearby table and murmured, "Excuse me. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Nathan." She tried to leave quickly, but Nathan gently held her arm. "Don't go because of them," he said softly, just for her to hear. "I need to go," she replied, avoiding his eyes. "Thank you for defending me, but I shouldn't be here." "Why not? This is your home too." The phrase caught her off guard. Home. That place had never been home to her. It was just the place where she worked to survive. "No, it's not," she said sadly. "This is your home, I just clean it." Nathan seemed to want to say something more, but Melissa was already walking away, heading quickly toward the exit of the hall. She heard his voice calling her name, but she kept walking. In the kitchen she found Dorothy and the other employees waiting for reports from the party. "So, how was it?" Dorothy asked eagerly. "It was complicated," replied Melissa, leaning against the counter. "Mr. Nathan defended me when some people started laughing at my dress." "Defended you how?" "He said I was the only genuine person in the room." The other women exchanged surprised looks. They had known Nathan since he was a child and knew he didn't usually get involved in social dramas. "Wow, that's serious," commented Martha, the older cook. "That boy never argues with his grandmother's guests." "It wasn't exactly an argument," explained Melissa, "but it was intense. I think I caused problems for him." At that moment, Nathan appeared at the kitchen door, surprising all the women. It was rare for him to come down there, especially during a party. "Melissa, can I talk to you?" he asked, still elegant in his black tuxedo. The other employees immediately made excuses to leave, leaving the two alone. The silence stretched for a few seconds before Nathan approached. "I apologize for the embarrassment upstairs," he said. "I didn't mean to put you in an uncomfortable situation." "You don't need to apologize," she replied, nervously fidgeting with her hands. "I'm the one who shouldn't have gone." "Of course you should. You work here. You're part of this house." "No, Mr. Nathan. I work for this house. It's different." He moved a little closer, and Melissa noticed his eyes were a lighter brown than she had seen before. "Can I ask you something?" he said. She nodded. "Did you study anything beyond high school? Did you take any courses?" The question put her on alert. Why did he want to know? "Why do you want to know?" "Because the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, it's not common. It seems like you've been exposed to more sophisticated environments." Melissa felt her heart race. She couldn't talk about the nursing school she had dropped out of. She couldn't talk about her previous life. I like to read," she said, opting for a half-truth. "I read a lot." "What kind of books?" "Romance, American literature, Mark Twain, Virginia Woolf." Nathan smiled for the first time that night. "Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite authors," he said. "Which of her books do you like the most?" "Mrs. Dalloway," she replied without hesitation, and immediately regretted it. It was a book she had read in college, in a humanities class. "Interesting choice," commented Nathan, studying her expression. "Why?" Melissa hesitated. How to explain that she identified with Clarissa, the simple protagonist who dreamed of a different life? "I think I identify with the character," she said quietly. "Clarissa?" "Yes." Nathan was silent for a moment, as if processing this information. "Melissa, can I ask another indiscreet question?" She looked at him warily. "You're not just a cleaner, are you?" The question hit her like a punch. She took a step back instinctively. I don't understand. Your vocabulary, your cultural references, the way you analyze things. You had a formal education, didn't you?" Melissa felt she was losing control of the situation. She needed to get out of there. "Mr. Nathan, I need to go home," she said, walking toward the door. "Melissa, wait." But she was already climbing the stairs that led to the staff exit. Nathan followed her, but when he reached the top, she had already disappeared into the night. Back in the ballroom, Nathan found his grandmother waiting with a furious expression. "We need to talk," said Mrs. Margaret. "Now." They headed to the matriarch's private office, an austere space decorated with antique furniture and family portraits. "What was that?" she asked as soon as she closed the door. "You humiliated our guests because of a maid?" "Humiliated?" Nathan turned to her in disbelief. She was the one being humiliated. She shouldn't even have been there. It was a mistake to invite the staff. "It was my idea, Grandma, and it was a good idea, at least until your friends decided to show their true colors." Mrs. Margaret took a deep breath, trying to control her irritation. "Nathan, you can't get involved with staff. It causes problems, gossip, embarrassing situations like today's." "Get involved?" Nathan laughed bitterly. "I just treated an employee with the respect she deserves. If that bothers your friends, that's their problem." "It's your problem," exploded Mrs. Margaret. "You are the heir of this family. You have responsibilities, an image to uphold. You can't go around defending cleaners in public." "Why not?" "Because it's not your place. Because there are social hierarchies that must be respected." Nathan looked at his grandmother with a mixture of disappointment and sadness. "You know what I think, Grandma? I think you're all afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of discovering that maybe this cleaner is more honest, smarter, and more worthy than any of your guests." Mrs. Margaret was silent for a few seconds, but Nathan continued. "And you know why I'm sure of that? Because she was the only person in the ballroom who didn't try to flatter me, didn't pretend to be interested in my business, didn't ask about my inheritance. She just wanted to leave." "That's exactly why you shouldn't get involved with her," said Mrs. Margaret. "People like that are dangerous, Nathan. They act humble, but..." "But what, Grandma?" Mrs. Margaret stopped mid-sentence, as if she had almost revealed something that should remain a secret. "Nothing, just keep your distance, please." "No," Nathan said firmly. I won't keep my distance. In fact, I'm going to offer her a promotion. Assistant housekeeper with a pay raise. Nathan, no. Why not? She's competent, dedicated, honest. Because I said no, shouted Mrs. Margaret, completely losing her composure. Nathan was shocked. He rarely saw his grandmother lose control like that. Grandma, what's going on? Why are you so resistant to this woman? Mrs. Margaret turned her back to him, walking to the window that overlooked the garden. Just trust me. There are things you don't know, don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. You can't, or you won't. Mrs. Margaret didn't answer. Nathan waited a few seconds and then sighed. Fine, but I'm going to find out what's going on here. The next day, Sunday, Nathan arrived early in the kitchen and found Martha preparing breakfast. Good morning, Mrs. Martha, he greeted her. Good morning, my boy. Coffee? I'll have some. And has Melissa arrived? Not yet, but she always arrives at 8 on Sundays. Nathan looked at the clock. It was 7:30. Mrs. Martha, can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Do you know Melissa well? Reasonably well. Why? Has she ever said anything about her past? Where she came from? What she did before? Martha hesitated, stirring the sugar in her coffee more vigorously than necessary. Why do you want to know? Curiosity. Yesterday I realized she has a more refined education than she appears to. Look, my son, said Martha, lowering her voice. Melissa is a good girl, hard-working, honest, but there's a sadness in her, you know, an old hurt. What kind of hurt? That she never told. But sometimes I see her looking at the books in the library with a longing on her face, as if she knew that world but couldn't be part of it anymore. Nathan absorbed this information in silence. Once, continued Martha, she was helping your grandfather during a high blood pressure crisis. I saw how she acted, how she knew exactly what to do. It wasn't the knowledge of an ordinary person. It was technical knowledge. Technical how? Like a nurse, a doctor, something like that. At that moment, they heard footsteps on the stairs. It was Melissa, arriving for work. Good morning, Mrs. Martha, she said, stopping abruptly when she saw Nathan. Mr. Nathan. Good morning, Melissa. How was your night? Fine, thank you. She seemed uncomfortable with his presence, avoiding eye contact while picking up the cleaning supplies. Melissa, can we talk? Asked Nathan. I need to work, sir. It's about work. She stopped and looked at him warily. What kind of talk? I want to offer a promotion. Melissa and Martha exchanged surprised looks. A promotion? Assistant housekeeper. Salary 40% higher, less manual labor, more administrative responsibilities. Melissa was silent for a few seconds, processing the proposal. Why? She finally asked. Because you are competent. Because you deserve it. You barely know me. I know enough. 2.5 years observing your work, your dedication. You never paid attention to my work before yesterday, she interrupted. The observation was true and caught them off guard. You're right, admitted Nathan, but yesterday opened my eyes to many things. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. And what does your grandmother think about this promotion? Asked Melissa. Nathan hesitated. It was a smart question and she knew it. That doesn't matter. I'm the one who manages the household staff. It does matter, she said firmly. Mrs. Margaret made it very clear yesterday that she doesn't approve of closeness between the family and the staff. Closeness? It's just a professional promotion. Melissa looked at him with an expression mixing sadness and disbelief. Mr. Nathan, with all due respect, you're trying to resolve a guilt from yesterday. You want to feel better about yourself by promoting the maid who was humiliated at your party. The analysis was so precise that Nathan was momentarily speechless. That's not it, he finally said. Yes, it is. And I understand. But you don't need to. I am fine as I am. But you could be better. Better, according to whom? According to you. Nathan moved a little closer, lowering his voice. Melissa, I know you're not just a cleaner. I know you had an education, that you studied, that you're capable of much more than what you're doing." She took a step back, as if she had been hit. "You know nothing about me." "Then tell me. Why? Why does it matter to you?" Nathan fell silent. It was a question for which he had no clear answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "It just matters." Melissa watched him for a few seconds, as if trying to decipher his intentions. "Mr. Nathan, I accept the promotion," she finally said, "but on one condition." "What?" "That you stop asking questions about my past." Nathan hesitated. His curiosity about her was becoming almost obsessive. "All right," he agreed, although not entirely convinced he could keep the promise. "Then I accept." That same morning, Nathan communicated the decision to Mrs. Margaret. The reaction was exactly what he expected. "Have you lost your mind?" she said, slamming her fist on the breakfast table. "You promoted that woman after what I told you yesterday. Grandma, she is the most competent employee we have. She deserves the opportunity." "She deserves nothing, and you know very well why you can't do this." "No, I don't know. You didn't explain it to me." Mrs. Margaret stood up abruptly, pacing nervously around the room. "Nathan, you cannot get involved with this woman. Please, trust me." "Get involved? It's just a professional relationship." "It's not, and you know it. And yesterday you caused a scandal because of her. Today you're offering promotions. What will you be doing tomorrow?" Nathan didn't answer because, honestly, he didn't know. "She is dangerous, Nathan," Mrs. Margaret continued. "People like her always are." "People like her? What kind of person is she, Grandma?" Mrs. Margaret stopped pacing and looked directly at her grandson. "The kind of person who can destroy this family." The phrase echoed through the room like a dark omen. Nathan looked at his grandmother with disbelief. "Grandma, you're talking about a cleaning lady, a woman who has cleaned our house for 2 years without causing a single problem. You don't understand." "Then make me understand," Nathan exploded. "Stop speaking in riddles and explain to me what's going on." Mrs. Margaret was silent for a few seconds, clearly struggling internally. "I can't," she said finally. "Just, please, fire her." "No." "Nathan, no, Grandma. I won't fire a competent employee just because you have some inexplicable prejudice against her." Mrs. Margaret sat down heavily in her armchair, suddenly looking older. "If you don't fire her," she said in a tired voice, "I will." "You can't. I'm the one who manages the household staff." "I can and I will. This is still my house." Nathan looked at his grandmother with a mixture of anger and disappointment. "If you do that, I will live on my own." "Nathan, I'm serious. If you fire Melissa without a valid reason, I will move out, and I'll take the entire management of the family businesses with me." It was a serious threat. Nathan had taken over the management of the family businesses 3 years ago, and his departure would be devastating for them. Mrs. Margaret watched him for a few seconds, recognizing the determination in his eyes. "Would you really do that?" "I would." She sighed deeply. "Fine. She can stay, but on one condition." "What?" "You stop taking an interest in her personal life. You keep a strictly professional relationship." Nathan nodded in agreement, although he knew it would be harder than he imagined. Meanwhile, on the other side of the mansion, Melissa was putting away her cleaning supplies in the closet when Dorothy approached. "Is it true you were promoted?" asked the head housekeeper. "Yes." "To assistant housekeeper?" "To assistant housekeeper." Dorothy was silent for a few seconds. Melissa sensed something was bothering the older woman. "Dorothy, what is it?" "Nothing. It's just... Are you sure this is a good idea?" "Why wouldn't it be?" "Because things are going to change. You'll have to deal directly with the family, make decisions, manage other staff. And you don't think I'm competent enough for that?" "It's not that," Dorothy said quickly. "It's that, well, you're new here. I've worked in this house for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened yesterday." "What do you mean?" "Mr. Nathan has never taken an interest in any employee. Never. And suddenly he's defending you in public, offering a promotion. And what's the problem?" Dorothy moved a little closer, lowering her voice. "The problem is that Mrs. Margaret doesn't like it. And when she doesn't like something, that thing usually doesn't last very long. Melissa felt a chill in her stomach. Do you think she'll fire me? I don't know, but I think you should be careful, very careful. That afternoon, Nathan decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. He left the mansion and walked through the tree-lined streets of the Upper East Side, trying to process the events of the last few days. There was something about Melissa that intrigued him deeply. It wasn't just the intelligence or the dignity she showed. It was something more subtle, more difficult to define, a familiarity he couldn't explain. Without consciously realizing it, he headed towards the more common streets a few miles from the mansion. He wanted to understand where Melissa came from, what kind of life she led outside of work. That's when he saw her. Melissa was standing at the door of a small public school, talking to an older woman. She wore a simple dress, but it was clean and well kept. Her hair was down, which made her look younger and more relaxed. Nathan hid behind a parked car to observe. He didn't want her to see him and think she was being followed. The conversation seemed serious. The older woman was gesturing a lot, and Melissa was shaking her head no. After a few minutes, the woman handed some papers to Melissa and said goodbye with a hug. Nathan waited for the woman to leave and then approached. Melissa? She turned around, clearly surprised and a little scared. Mr. Nathan, what are you doing here? I was walking and I saw you. Is everything okay? Melissa quickly folded the papers, trying to hide them. Everything's fine. It was just a conversation. Nathan noticed she seemed nervous. Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you. It's just that what? Can I ask what you're doing here? Melissa hesitated for a few seconds. I was visiting my old teacher, she finally said. Teacher of what? From high school. Nathan knew she was lying. The woman she had spoken to was too young to have been her high school teacher. Melissa, can I be direct? You can. You're lying to me. She looked at him with a mixture of anger and hurt. So what? I have a right to privacy, don't I? Of course you do. But what? You promoted me, so now you own my personal life? That's not it. Then what is it? Nathan was silent for a few seconds. She was right. He was being invasive. I'm sorry, he said. You're right. Your personal life is none of my business. Melissa seemed surprised by the apology. Thank you, she said quietly. Can I at least offer you a ride? My car is over there. She looked in the direction he pointed and saw a black Lexus parked a few streets up. Thank you, but you don't have to. I'll take the bus. Melissa, please, let me do this. As a boss concerned for his employees' safety. She hesitated. All right, but only to the nearest subway station. During the drive, they were silent. Nathan tried to think of something to say that wasn't invasive, and Melissa looked out the window, clearly uncomfortable. Melissa, he finally said. Yes? Yesterday, at the party. Thank you. Thank you for what? For making me realize who my real friends are. She looked at him curiously. What do you mean? The people who laughed at you yesterday are the same ones who pretend to respect me because I'm rich. After you left, I heard horrible comments about me too. What kind of comments? That I was losing my mind, that I was mixing with riffraff. Things like that. Melissa was silent for a few seconds. And that bothered you? A lot. It made me realize I live in a bubble of falseness. Everyone lives in bubbles, Mr. Nathan. The difference is that yours is made of money. The observation was blunt but true. And yours? He asked. What is your bubble made of? Of necessity, she answered without hesitation. I do what I need to do to survive. And what do you need to do to live? The question came out before he could think better. Melissa looked at him with a sad expression. That's a very difficult question. Why? Because it's been a long time since I thought about living, only about surviving. The answer hit him like a punch. There was a depth of pain in those words that left him not knowing what to say. You can stop here, she said, as they approached the subway station. Thank you for the ride. Melissa. Yes? If you ever want to talk about anything, I'll listen. No judgments. She looked at him for a few seconds, as if assessing his sincerity. Thank you, she said finally. But some conversations are too dangerous. She got out of the car and disappeared into the crowd at the station. Nathan stood there for a few minutes, thinking about her last sentence. Conversations too dangerous? What kind of past did this woman have? The next morning, Monday, Melissa arrived early for her first day as an assistant housekeeper. Dorothy greeted her with a slightly forced smile and began explaining the new responsibilities. You will be responsible for coordinating the cleaning of the second-floor bedrooms, managing the stock of cleaning supplies, and supervising the work of Susan and Martha on Mondays and Tuesdays. Martha, too? Only for organizing the pantry, she remains the head cook. Melissa nodded, absorbing the information. And about direct contact with the family? Only when necessary. Mrs. Margaret prefers to deal with me, but sometimes you may need to speak with Mr. Nathan about administrative matters. I understand. Melissa, said Dorothy, lowering her voice. A tip. Be discreet. Very discreet. Mrs. Margaret is not happy with your promotion. Did she say that? Not in so many words, but I've worked here for 15 years. I know how to recognize the signs. During the morning, Melissa dedicated herself to her new tasks with efficiency. She organized schedules, took inventory of the pantry, coordinated the work of the other staff. Everything was going well until the moment she needed to fetch some supplies from the storeroom located in the basement. The storeroom was an area she rarely visited. It was at the back of the house in a somewhat forgotten area where they kept old things and extra supplies. When she went down the stairs, she noticed that one of the shelves was disorganized. While trying to organize it, she knocked over a box that was poorly placed. The contents spilled onto the floor. Old documents, photos, yellowed papers. Melissa bent down to pick everything up, but one specific photo caught her attention. It was a black and white photo, clearly old, of a young woman wearing a nurse's uniform. The woman in the photo had a familiar face, an expression she knew. With trembling hands, she turned the photo over. On the back, a careful handwriting said, Antonia Johnson, nursing graduation, 1978. Melissa felt the world spin around her. Antonia Johnson, her mother. How was a photo of her mother in the storeroom of the Anderson mansion? She looked at the other documents scattered on the floor and found more things related to Antonia Johnson. A work certificate dated 1979, a letter of reference, a medical report. With the documents in her hands, Melissa ran back to the kitchen where she found Martha preparing lunch. Mrs. Martha, she said, trying to control her breathing. Did you know a woman named Antonia Johnson? Martha dropped the spoon she was holding. Where did you hear that name? Melissa showed her the photo. I found this in the storeroom. Martha looked at the photo and turned pale. My God, Antonia, it's been so long. You knew her? Knew her? Girl, she worked here. She was one of the best nurses I've ever seen. A nurse? My mother was a nurse? Martha was shocked. Your mother? Antonia was your mother? She was. She passed away when I was a child. I never knew the details about her work. Martha sat down heavily in a chair. Melissa, you can't let anyone know about this. Anyone. Why? Because Antonia was fired from here under very complicated circumstances. What kind of circumstances? Martha looked around, making sure they were alone. She was accused of theft. Valuable jewels went missing from Mrs. Margaret's room, and Antonia was the only person who had access that day. Melissa felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. My mother was not a thief. I know that, all the staff knew. Antonia was the most honest person who worked in this house, but what? But she was fired anyway, and the Anderson family has a lot of influence. After that, she never got another job as a nurse. Melissa was trying to process all this information when they heard footsteps approaching. It was Nathan. Good morning, Mrs. Martha. Melissa. Good morning, Mr. Nathan, the two women replied. Nathan sensed something strange in the air. Martha seemed nervous and Melissa was worryingly pale. "Is everything all right here?" "Everything's fine," Martha said quickly. "Melissa was helping me with the pantry inventory." Nathan looked at Melissa, who avoided eye contact. "Melissa, are you okay? You look a bit down." "I'm fine, just a little tired." Nathan didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press further. "All right, if you need anything, call me." After he left, Martha grabbed Melissa's arm. "Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. You can't tell anyone about your mother, especially not Nathan." "Why?" "Because if Mrs. Margaret finds out who you are, she'll fire you on the spot, and this time, she'll make sure to destroy your life." "But if my mother was innocent, it doesn't matter. What matters is that she was accused. And for the Anderson family, that's enough." Melissa looked again at the photo of her mother. Antonia Johnson looked so young, so full of hope. "Mrs. Martha, do you know what really happened to the jewels?" Martha was silent for a few seconds. "I have my suspicions," she said finally, "but I could never prove anything." "What kind of suspicions?" "Better not to talk about it. Some truths are too dangerous." It was the second time in 2 days that someone had used that expression with Melissa. First, she herself had told Nathan that some conversations were too dangerous. Now Martha was talking about dangerous truths. "Mrs. Martha, I need to know the truth about my mother." "Child, I need to. She spent the last years of her life as a social outcast because of a false accusation. She never got decent work again. She was never respected again. She died poor and humiliated for something she didn't do." Martha saw the determination in Melissa's eyes and sighed. "All right, but not here. Let's meet after work, in the square in front of the neighborhood church, at 7 tonight. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." The rest of the day passed slowly for Melissa. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept going back to the morning's discovery. Her mother had worked in that house. She had been falsely accused. She had had her life destroyed by the family that now employed her. And the most ironic part, Nathan, the man who had defended her at the party, was the grandson of the woman who had destroyed her mother. At 7 that night, Melissa met Martha in the square as agreed. The older woman had a serious, worried expression. "Are you sure you want to hear this story?" Martha asked. "I am." "Then let's walk. It's better if we don't stay in one place." They began walking slowly along the park paths as Martha organized her thoughts. "Your mother started working at the house in 1979. She had just graduated from nursing school and was hired to care for Mr. Charles, Mrs. Margaret's father, who was ill." "My grandfather." "Your grandfather had serious heart problems. The doctors weren't giving him much hope, but Antonia managed to stabilize him and extend his life by almost 2 years." "And how was she accused of theft?" "In 1981, some valuable jewelry went missing from Mrs. Margaret's bedroom. A diamond necklace that had been in the family for generations, some rings, pearl earrings." "And why did they accuse my mother?" "Because she was one of the few people who had access to the bedroom. She cared for Mr. Charles, who slept in the next room, and sometimes needed to get medicine from Mrs. Margaret's bedroom." "But she wasn't the only one with access." "No, there were other staff, family members, visitors, but your mother was the most vulnerable. She was young, didn't have an influential family to defend her, didn't have the means to hire a lawyer. And you said you had suspicions about the real culprit." Martha stopped walking and looked around, making sure no one was nearby. "I haven't told this to anyone in 40 years, she said, "but on the night the jewelry disappeared, I saw someone leaving Mrs. Margaret's room." "Who?" "Richard Anderson, Mrs. Margaret's youngest son." Melissa felt her heart speed up. "Gabriel's father?" "No. Gabriel is Henry's son, the oldest son. Richard was the youngest, a troubled young man." "Troubled how?" "Gambling addiction, debts, involvement with dangerous people. He was always needing money, and the family was tired of paying his debts." "And you think he stole the jewelry to pay his debts?" "I'm sure of it. I saw him leaving the room at 3 in the morning, carrying a small bag. The next day, the jewelry was gone." "Why did you never tell anyone this?" Martha laughed bitterly. "Tell who? Who would believe the word of a cook against a family member?" "But my mother was destroyed because of this." "I know, and it has eaten away at me all these years. But there was nothing I could do. Richard died a few years later in a car accident. He took the secret with him." Melissa felt a growing anger inside her. Her mother had been sacrificed to protect the family's reputation. "Mrs. Martha, does Gabriel know this story?" "No. He was very young when it happened. He must have been about 5 or 6 years old at the time." "And does Mrs. Margaret know that her own son was the real thief?" "I suspect so. Mothers always know these things. But admitting it would mean acknowledging that she destroyed an innocent person to protect a guilty one." Melissa stopped walking. She needed to process all this information. "What should I do?" she asked. "Nothing," Martha replied firmly. "You should do nothing. Keep this information to yourself and continue with your life." "How can I continue my life knowing this?" "The same way your mother continued her life after being falsely accused, with dignity and silence. But that's not right. Many things in this life aren't right, child, but we can't always change them." Melissa looked toward the lights of the Anderson mansion, visible atop the hill. "What if I tell Gabriel?" "Gabriel is a good young man," said Martha, "but he is an Anderson. When it comes down to it, he will protect the family." "Are you sure?" "Yes, I've seen this story repeat itself many times. When things get tough, the rich always protect their own." They stood in silence for a few minutes, each lost in her own thoughts. "Mrs. Martha," Melissa said finally, "why did you tell me all this?" "Because you have a right to know, and because I need your help to carry this burden. 40 years keeping this secret alone was too much. Thank you for trusting me. Now promise me you'll be careful, very careful." "I promise." But even as she said it, Melissa knew she wouldn't be capable of simply forgetting everything she had discovered. The injustice committed against her mother cried out for reparation. The next morning, Tuesday, Melissa arrived at work with a renewed determination. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do, but she was certain she couldn't leave things as they were. During the morning, while organizing some documents in the house's office, she had an idea. If she could find more evidence about what happened in 1981, maybe she could build a solid case against the official version of the facts. That's when Nathan appeared in the office. "Good morning, Melissa. How are things around here?" "Good morning, Mr. Nathan. Everything's fine." Nathan noticed she seemed different. There was a tension in her shoulders, a determination in her eyes that wasn't there the week before. "Can I ask you a question?" he said. "Of course. Yesterday you and Mrs. Martha seemed to be discussing something serious. Did something happen?" Melissa hesitated. This was her chance to tell Nathan everything, but Martha's words echoed in her mind. "In the end, you will protect the family." "It was nothing important," she said, "just work-related matters." Nathan didn't seem convinced. "Melissa, if there's any problem, anything at all, you can talk to me. You know that, right?" "I know, thank you." Nathan stood there for a few seconds, clearly wanting to say something more. "Melissa." "Yes?" "Do you believe people can change?" The question took her by surprise. "It depends," she answered. "Why?" "It's just that sometimes we discover things about our family, about our past, that make us question everything we thought we knew." Melissa felt her heart speed up. Did he know something? "What kind of things?" Nathan moved a little closer, lowering his voice. "Yesterday I was talking to my grandmother about our family's history. I asked about former employees, people who worked here in the past." "And what did she say?" "She said she prefers not to talk about the past, that some things should stay buried." "And do you agree?" "I don't know. I think sometimes we need to face the past to build a better future." Melissa watched him for a few seconds. There was sincerity in his words, but also naivety. "Mr. Nathan, can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course. If you discovered that someone in your family did something terrible in the past, What would you do? Nathan thought for a few seconds. I would try to repair the damage, he said finally. Even if it was difficult, even if it was costly. Even if it hurt the family's reputation. A reputation built on lies is worthless. The answer surprised Melissa. Maybe Martha was wrong about Nathan. Mr. Nathan, she said, making an impulsive decision. What do you know about an employee named Antonia Johnson? Nathan stopped breathing for a few seconds. How do you know that name? That's not important. What do you know about her? Nathan walked to the window, turning his back to Melissa. I know she worked here a long time ago, he said slowly. I know she was fired under accusations of theft. And I know my grandmother doesn't like to talk about it. And do you believe she was guilty? Nathan turned to look at her. Why do you want to know? Melissa made a decision. It was now or never. Because Antonia Johnson was my mother. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan looked at her with disbelief, as if he was trying to process the information. Your mother? My mother? And she was not a thief. Nathan slowly approached, still in shock. Melissa, are you sure? I am. I found documents in the storage room yesterday. Photos, work certificates, medical reports. My God! My mother was accused unfairly. She never got work in her field again. She spent the rest of her life doing cleaning, janitorial work, underemployment. She died poor and humiliated for something she didn't do. Nathan sat down heavily in a chair. Melissa, I didn't know. I was very young when that happened. I know. But why didn't you tell me before? Because the people who know the truth told me it would be dangerous, that your family always protects itself no matter the cost. What people? Who else knows about this? That doesn't matter. What matters is that now you know. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, clearly upset. Melissa, if your mother was innocent, if she was unfairly accused, she was, and she was. Then we need to fix this. We need to find out the truth. How? I don't know yet. But we'll find out. I promise you. Melissa watched him carefully. There was determination in his eyes, but there was also fear. Mr. Nathan, your grandmother is not going to like this. I don't care what she likes or doesn't like. If an injustice was committed, it needs to be fixed. Even if it reveals embarrassing family secrets. Nathan hesitated for a few seconds. Even then. At that moment, the office door swung open abruptly. It was Mrs. Margaret, with a furious expression on her face. What are you two doing in here? She asked. Talking about work, Grandma. What kind of work talk requires closed doors? Nathan and Melissa exchanged quick glances. We were discussing the reorganization of the cleaning schedule, said Melissa. Mrs. Margaret looked at her suspiciously. Melissa, you may leave. I need to speak with my grandson. Of course, Ma'am. Melissa left the office but stayed right outside the door, trying to hear the conversation. She didn't have to try hard, as the voices soon rose. Nathan, I warned you not to get involved with that woman, Mrs. Margaret was saying. Grandma, I'm not getting involved. It's just work. Don't lie to me. I see how you look at her, how you talk to her. This has to stop. Why are you so against her? Because women like her are dangerous. Dangerous how? They play the victim, win the trust of naive men, and then what? Then they destroy entire families. Melissa heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, pretending to be busy with other tasks. A few seconds later, Nathan came out of the office with a dark expression. He found her in the kitchen and made a discreet sign for her to follow him. They went to a more secluded part of the house where they could talk without being overheard. The conversation with your grandmother didn't go well, I imagine, said Melissa. It was exactly as I expected. She's determined to keep me away from you. Maybe that's for the best. No, said Nathan vehemently. I won't let this continue. If your mother was wronged, we'll prove her innocence. How? By investigating, looking for evidence, talking to people who were here at the time. Mr. Nathan, this could have serious consequences for you, for your family. So what? If my family committed an injustice, it needs to face the consequences. Melissa was impressed by his determination. Maybe Martha had been wrong after all. "All right," she said. "Let's investigate. But carefully." "Very carefully," agreed Nathan. During the following days, Nathan and Melissa began their discreet investigation. Nathan had access to the family's old files, while Melissa talked to older staff who still worked in the house. Martha, initially reluctant, ended up telling Nathan the same story she had told Melissa. The young man was shocked to learn that his uncle Richard had been the real culprit. "Why did no one ever tell me this?" he asked. "Because your family prefers to bury inconvenient truths," answered Martha. "It's easier to blame a poor maid than to admit that a son of the house was a thief." Nathan also discovered interesting documents in the family archives. Reports from that time showed that Antonia Johnson had been an exemplary employee. There were no complaints about her work or behavior. More importantly, he found financial records that showed Richard had made suspicious payments right after the jewels disappeared, payments that coincided exactly with the estimated value of the stolen pieces. "Melissa, look at this," he said, showing the documents. "Your uncle made a transfer of $50,000 3 days after the robbery. At the time, it was exactly the value of the jewels. Who was the transfer to? To a private individual, someone named Mark Anthony Williams." "Who is that?" "I don't know, but we'll find out." Nathan's investigation revealed that Mark Anthony Williams was a known fence for stolen goods who operated in New York in the 80s. He had been arrested several times for similar crimes. "Now we have concrete evidence," said Nathan. "Your uncle sold the jewels to a known fence." "But that was over 40 years ago," said Melissa. "Mark Anthony Williams could be dead. The evidence might have been destroyed." "Maybe, but at least we know the truth." "And what are we going to do with this truth?" Nathan was silent for a few seconds. "We're going to confront my grandmother," he said finally. "We're going to tell her everything we discovered and demand that she publicly acknowledge your mother's innocence. Mr. Nathan, this will cause a huge scandal. My family needs to face the consequences of their actions, even if it's 40 years later." On Friday night, Nathan decided it was time for the confrontation. He asked Melissa to wait in the kitchen while he spoke with Margaret. He found his grandmother in her private office reading some documents. "Grandma, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Margaret looked up from the papers. "If it's about that employee again, I don't want to hear it." "It's about Antonia Johnson." The name provoked an immediate reaction. Margaret turned pale and dropped the documents she was holding. "What did you say?" "Antonia Johnson, the nurse who was unjustly accused of theft in 1981. "Nathan, I don't know what you're talking about." "I know you do, and I also know she was innocent." Margaret stood up slowly, walking to the window. "Even if she was, that was a long time ago. It doesn't matter anymore." "Yes, it does." "Yes, especially because her daughter works here." Margaret turned abruptly. "Her daughter? What daughter?" "Melissa Johnson, our assistant housekeeper, daughter of Antonia Johnson." The shock on Margaret's face was evident. She leaned on the desk to keep from falling. That can't be true." "It is true. And she knows everything. She knows her mother was unjustly accused to protect the real culprit." "Nathan, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly," he exploded. "You sacrificed an innocent woman to protect Richard." Margaret was silent for a few seconds, clearly shaken. "How did you find out about Richard?" "I found evidence, financial documents, witnesses. Everything points to him as the real thief." Margaret sat down heavily in her armchair. "Nathan, you can't understand how difficult it was back then." "Difficult what? Admitting that your son was a thief?" "Richard was involved with dangerous people. He owed a lot of money if he didn't pay. And so you ruined an innocent woman's life." "It wasn't supposed to be like that," said Margaret, her voice breaking. "We thought she would find another job easily. We didn't imagine the accusations would follow her for so long." "Grandma, you destroyed one person's life to save another, and you still think that can be justified." Margaret started to cry. "I was a mother, Nathan. It was my duty to protect my son, even at the cost of another person's life. Richard died just a few years later. The money from the jewels didn't solve anything. He kept getting involved with bad people until the accident. Nathan looked at his grandmother with a mix of pity and disappointment. "Grandma, you've carried this guilt for 40 years. Isn't it time to do the right thing? What do you want from me? I want you to publicly admit that Antonia Johnson was innocent. I want you to offer a formal apology for the injustice that was committed. And I want you to offer her family fair compensation. Nathan, this will ruin our reputation. Our reputation is already ruined, at least to me." Margaret was silent for a few minutes, clearly wrestling with it internally. "And if I do this, can you guarantee that she won't sue the family? That she won't go to the press?" "I can't guarantee anything, but I know Melissa well enough to know she doesn't want revenge. She just wants justice for her mother's memory." Margaret sighed deeply. "I need to think. Grandma, it's already been 40 years of thinking. It's time to act. Give me a week. 3 days. Nathan, 3 days, Grandma. After that, I'll make everything public myself." Nathan left the office and went to look for Melissa in the kitchen. She was nervous, pacing back and forth. "So? How did it go?" she asked anxiously. "Better than I expected. She admitted everything." "She really admitted it?" "She admitted that she knew about your mother's innocence, that they protected Richard, that they committed a terrible injustice." Melissa sat down in a chair, clearly emotional. My mother really was innocent. She was, and everyone who matters is going to know it. What happens now?" "Now we wait. I gave my grandmother 3 days to make a decision." "What kind of decision?" "To publicly acknowledge your mother's innocence and offer fair compensation." "And if she doesn't do it?" "Then I will. I'll tell the whole story to the press." Melissa looked at him with gratitude. "Mr. Nathan, why are you doing this? Why are you risking so much for the memory of someone you never even met?" Nathan stepped closer to her, looking directly into her eyes. "Because it's the right thing to do, and because you deserve justice. Your mother deserves justice." "Thank you," she said softly. Over the weekend, the tension in the house was palpable. Margaret barely left her room, clearly distressed about the situation. Nathan tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but he was visibly worried about his grandmother's reaction. Melissa, for her part, felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope that the truth would finally come out, and fear of the consequences it might bring. On Sunday night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, thinking about her mother, imagining how she would feel knowing her innocence would finally be recognized. On Monday morning, Margaret asked to speak with Nathan and Melissa together. They gathered in the office, everyone clearly tense. "I spent the entire weekend thinking about what you said to me," Margaret began. "And I've come to the conclusion that you are right." Nathan and Melissa exchanged looks of relief. "I committed a terrible injustice against Antonia Johnson," Margaret continued. "And that injustice affected not only her, but also her family, her daughters." "Ma'am," Melissa started. "Let me finish," Margaret interrupted. I need to do the right thing, even if it's too late." She went to the desk and picked up some documents. "I've prepared a formal statement acknowledging Antonia Johnson's innocence. I've also prepared a public apology and a plan for financial compensation for your family." Melissa couldn't hold back her tears. "Mrs. Margaret, Melissa, I know that nothing I do can undo the wrong that was done, but I hope this is a start." Nathan approached his grandmother and hugged her. "Thank you, Grandma. I know it was difficult. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life," she said, "but also the most necessary." The statement was published in New York's major newspapers on Wednesday. The front-page headline of the New York Times was, "Anderson Family Acknowledges 40-Year-Old Judicial Error." The article told the whole story. The unjust accusation against Antonia Johnson, the real culprit, the belated recognition of the truth. The impact was enormous. Melissa received calls from journalists wanting to interview her, but she declined them all. She didn't want to turn the situation into a media circus. The financial compensation offered by the family, included not only a substantial sum of money, but also a scholarship fund for any member of the Johnson family who wanted to return to school. "Melissa," said Nathan a few days after the publication, "my grandmother would like to speak with you, privately." "About what?" "I don't know. She just asked me to ask if you would agree to talk to her." Melissa hesitated. There was still hurt, there was still resentment, but there was also curiosity. "All right, I'll talk to her." The meeting took place in Margaret's office on a Thursday afternoon. The matriarch seemed to have aged years in just 1 week. "Melissa, thank you for agreeing to speak with me," she said. "You're welcome, Mom. I wanted you to know that I recognize the wrong I did to your mother, and by extension, to you. Thank you for acknowledging it. But I wanted to explain, not to justify myself, but so that you understand how it all happened." Melissa nodded, willing to listen. "Richard was my youngest son. He was always troubled, always involved with complicated people and situations. When I found out he had stolen the jewels, my first instinct was to protect him. Even knowing it would harm an innocent person? At the time I thought it would only be temporary, that your mother would find another job, that the situation would resolve itself. I never imagined the consequences would be so lasting. But when you realized my mother couldn't find work anymore, why didn't you correct the situation?" Margaret lowered her eyes. "Because it was already too late. Admitting the mistake would mean confessing that I had lied for years, and I was too much of a coward to do that. Mrs. Margaret, my mother died bitter. She never understood why she had been accused. She never recovered from the humiliation. I know, and that will haunt me until the day I die." They sat in silence for a few minutes. "Melissa," Margaret said finally, "are you going to continue working here?" It was a question for which Melissa didn't have a ready answer. "I don't know yet. I would understand if you didn't want to. I would understand if you wanted to leave and never see any of us again. Would you also understand if I wanted to stay and make your lives a living hell?" Margaret looked at her with surprise. You have that right. But that's not what I want," said Melissa. "I don't want revenge, Mrs. Margaret. I just wanted justice for my mother, and now I have that. So will you stay? I'll think about it." That night, Melissa walked through the mansion's garden, thinking about everything that had happened. Her life had completely changed in a matter of weeks. It was then that she found Nathan sitting on a bench under a tree. "May I sit?" she asked. "Of course." They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the stars. "How are you feeling?" asked Nathan. "Confused," she answered honestly. "Relieved to know the truth, but confused about what to do now." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. For years my only concern was survival. Now, for the first time, I have options." "What kind of options?" "I can go back to school, finish the nursing school I dropped out of. I can travel. I can start my own life." "And what's stopping you from doing that?" Melissa looked at him. "You," she said softly. Nathan felt his heart speed up. "Me?" "You complicated everything, Mr. Nathan. It was easier when I just saw you as just another rich boss. And now? Now I see you as someone who risked everything to do the right thing, as someone who truly cares about justice." Nathan moved a little closer. "Melissa, can I be honest?" "You can. Since that night at the party, I can't stop thinking about you. Not just as an employee, not just as a person who needs help. I think of you as a woman. Mr. Nathan, just Nathan. Nathan, you know this is complicated, very complicated. Because of the social difference? Because of everything. The history of our families, the difference in our worlds, the expectations people have for you. Melissa, do you think I care about any of that? You should care. You have a position in society, responsibilities." Nathan stood up and started pacing nervously. "You know what I've discovered in the last few weeks? That a position in society is worthless if it's not accompanied by character, and that the responsibilities that were forced on me are, for the most part, convenient lies." "What do you mean?" I mean, I've spent my whole life being prepared to inherit an empire built on injustices, to perpetuate a system that sacrifices the innocent to protect the guilty. And now I want to build something different, something based on truth, justice, and people's dignity. Melissa was impressed by the passion in his voice. And how do you plan to do that? I don't know yet, but I know I want to do it alongside someone who inspires me to be a better person. Nathan, Melissa, I know it's too soon. I know you need time to process everything that's happened, but I want you to know that I've fallen in love with you. The words hung in the air between them. Melissa felt her heart beating fast. Nathan, are you sure you're not confusing gratitude with love? I'm sure, because what I feel for you didn't start after I learned about your mother. It started that first night, when you refused to accept humiliation without losing your dignity. And what do you expect from me? Nothing. Just that you consider the possibility of us getting to know each other better, as people, as equals. Melissa was silent for a few seconds. Nathan, if I agree to explore this thing between us, it has to be on one condition. What? That it's real, not a romantic prince and pauper fantasy, not an emotional charity project. It has to be based on who we really are. That's what I want most. Then we can try. Nathan smiled for the first time in days. Does that mean you'll stay, that you won't leave? It means I'll stay a little longer, to see where this can lead. They moved closer slowly, and Nathan gently touched Melissa's face. Can I kiss you? You can. The kiss was soft, tender, full of unspoken promises. When they parted, both were emotional. Melissa. Yes? Thank you for letting me know the truth, about your mother, about my family, about myself. Thank you for fighting for the truth, even when it was hard. 2 weeks later, Melissa made an important decision. She would use part of the financial compensation to go back to college and finish her nursing degree. Nathan fully supported the decision and offered to help with flexible work schedules so she could study. Are you sure you don't mind? She asked. Mind? Melissa, I'm proud. You're fulfilling the dream your mother had to abandon. That's exactly what I think, that I'm doing this for her too. The change in the household's dynamic was gradual but noticeable. Mrs. Margaret, although still reserved, treated Melissa with a respect that hadn't existed before. The other staff noticed the change and began to see her differently. Martha was the one who best expressed the transformation. It's as if a shadow that had been hanging over this house for 40 years had finally been lifted. Nathan also changed. He became more involved with social issues, more concerned with justice in the family businesses. He began to implement fairer work policies, better salaries, better conditions. It's incredible how learning your story changed my perspective on everything, he said to Melissa one evening. How so? Before I saw the staff, the employees, as numbers on a spreadsheet. Now I see people with stories, dreams, needs. And did that change anything in practice? It changed everything. We increased salaries by 20%, created a scholarship program, implemented a comprehensive health plan. Didn't the shareholders complain? Some complained, but the financial results were even better. Valued employees work better, are more loyal, produce more. Melissa smiled. It seems justice and profit can go hand in hand. Who would have thought, right? Laughed Nathan. 6 months later, Melissa was completely adapted to the new routine. She worked part-time as an assistant housekeeper and studied nursing in the evenings. Her grades were excellent, and she had become one of the top students in her class. The relationship with Nathan developed naturally. They spent a lot of time together, talking about everything: work, studies, plans for the future, memories of the past. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if your mother could see all this, said Nathan one Sunday morning, as they had coffee in the garden. I think she would be proud, replied Melissa. Not just because the truth was acknowledged, but because she would see that I managed to turn the pain into something positive. How so? Well, if it weren't for this whole story, I never would have gone back to school. I never would have gotten to know the real you. I never would have discovered that I can dream big. Nathan smiled. And what are your big dreams? I want to graduate from nursing school. I want to work in an area where I can help people. Maybe even create an organization to help families who have suffered injustices like ours. That's beautiful. And you? What are your big dreams? Nathan thought for a few seconds. I want to turn the family business into a benchmark for social responsibility. I want to use our influence to create positive change in society. And I want to do all of this alongside a woman who inspires me every day. What woman is that? Asked Melissa, pretending not to understand. Nathan moved closer and held her hands. A courageous, intelligent, determined woman. A woman who taught me that true worth has nothing to do with money. Nathan. Melissa. I love you. Truly, completely. Forever. I love you too. They kissed under the golden morning light, surrounded by the garden flowers. It was a perfect moment, built on a solid foundation of truth and justice. 1 year later, Melissa graduated from nursing school with honors. The graduation ceremony was an especially emotional moment as she dedicated her diploma to her mother's memory. Nathan was in the audience beaming with pride. Mrs. Margaret was also there, a presence that would have been unthinkable months before. After the ceremony, there was a small party at the mansion. All the staff were invited, a clear change from the family's previous policy. During the party, Mrs. Margaret approached Melissa. "Congratulations, Dr. Johnson," she said with a genuine smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Margaret. May I speak with you in private?" They stepped away from the group a little. "Melissa, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Thank you. When I see what you've achieved, despite everything my family did to yours, I'm impressed by your strength. Mrs. Margaret, the past is in the past. Now we're building something new. That's true, and I want to be part of that building if you'll allow me." Melissa was surprised by the vulnerability in the older woman's voice. "Of course I will. I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to coordinate a new project for the Family Foundation, a program to assist families who have suffered legal injustices." Melissa was speechless. "Mrs. Margaret, it would be a way to honor your mother's memory and to help other people who went through what you went through." That's perfect. So you accept?" "I accept." They hugged, emotional. It was the closing of a painful cycle and the beginning of a new era. 2 years later, the program coordinated by Melissa had already helped more than 50 families. She had become a respected nurse and a recognized activist in the fight for social justice. Nathan, in turn, had completely transformed the management of the family businesses. They were now a model of corporate responsibility, offering thousands of dignified jobs and investing heavily in social projects. The relationship between them had solidified. They lived together in a house near the mansion, but independent. It was an arrangement that respected both family tradition and their need for autonomy. One Friday evening, while having dinner at home, Nathan asked a question Melissa didn't expect. "Melissa, have you ever thought about getting married?" She almost choked on her water. "Married? To you?" "Well, not necessarily to me," he joked. "But you'd be my first choice." Melissa laughed. "Nathan, you know marriage for people like us is complicated." "Why complicated?" "Because you are Nathan Anderson, heir to a financial empire, and I am Melissa Johnson, daughter of a wronged maid. First, you are Melissa Johnson, nurse graduated with honors, social activist, coordinator of justice programs. Second, I am Nathan Anderson, a man who was lucky enough to find the woman of his life." "Nathan." "Melissa, when I look at you, I don't see social differences. I see the woman I fell in love with, the woman I want to build a life with, have children with, grow old with. Have you thought about how society would react? The business world?" "I have, and I've decided I don't care. The only opinions that matter to me are yours and my own conscience." Melissa was silent for a few seconds, processing his words. "Nathan, if I say yes..." "Are you saying yes?" I'm saying that if I say yes, it has to be for real. A real marriage, not a fairy tale, with real problems, real challenges, real commitments. That's exactly what I want. Then yes, I accept marrying you. Nathan stood up so quickly, he knocked over his chair. He ran to her and lifted her into his arms, spinning her around in the air. You said yes. You said yes. I said yes, you crazy man. They laughed and kissed, mentally planning the future they would build together. The wedding was scheduled for 6 months later. It would be a simple but meaningful ceremony. At the Anderson mansion, in the same hall where Melissa had been humiliated years before. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. It was a way of showing that this space, once a symbol of social exclusion, now represented inclusion and true love. The preparations were intense. Nathan wanted to invite half of New York, but Melissa preferred something more intimate. Nathan, it doesn't have to be a huge celebration, she said, but I want everyone to know how proud I am to be marrying you. Everyone already knows. The question is, are you sure you really want to do this? Melissa, for the 1000th time, I am absolutely sure. Why? Are you having doubts? Not doubts, but fears. What kind of fears? Fear of not being able to be the wife you deserve. Fear of not fully adapting to this world. Fear that our different backgrounds will cause problems in the future. Nathan approached and held her hands. Melissa, you are already everything I need. You don't need to adapt to any world, because we are going to create our own world. And about our different backgrounds, they are not an obstacle. They are part of our story. What do you mean? If you weren't Antonia Johnson's daughter, if I weren't Mrs. Margaret's grandson, we would never have met. Our love story was born exactly from our differences. Melissa smiled. When you put it like that, it seems like fate. I believe it was fate. Fate that allowed us to correct the mistakes of the past and build a better future. On the wedding day, Melissa was radiant. She wore a simple but elegant dress that she had chosen herself. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, just beautiful. Martha, who had become like a second mother to her, helped her get ready. Your mother would be so proud, said the older woman, adjusting the veil. You think so? I'm sure of it. She always dreamed that you would have a better life. And look where you are now. Martha, thank you for everything. For keeping the truth all these years, for telling me when the right time came. My dear, it was the right thing to do. And seeing you happy is the best reward I could have. The ceremony was emotional. Nathan looked elegant in his dark suit, but it was easy to see he was nervous. When Melissa entered the hall, he smiled in a way that made everyone present realize how much he loved her. Mrs. Margaret, who had once tried to prevent any closeness between them, now cried with emotion seeing her grandson marry the woman she had learned to respect and admire. The vows they wrote were personal and touching. Nathan spoke about how Melissa had changed his worldview, taught him about dignity and courage, and shown him that true love transcends any social barrier. Melissa spoke about how Nathan had risked everything to seek the truth, how he had transformed pain into justice, and how he had proven that there are people willing to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. When the priest asked if anyone had any objections to the marriage, there was a moment of tense silence, but no voice spoke up. Nathan Henry Anderson, do you take Melissa Johnson to be your wife, to love and to respect, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, till death do you part? I do, and I promise much more than that. Melissa Johnson, do you take Nathan Henry Anderson to be your husband, to love and to respect, in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, till death do you part? I do, with all my heart. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Nathan, you may kiss your bride. The kiss was long and passionate, sealing not only their union, but the union of two families that had found peace through love and truth. The party that followed was joyful and full of meaning. In the same hall where Melissa had once been humiliated for wearing a simple dress, she now danced her first dance as a wife, wearing a dress she had chosen not for the brand or the price, but because she felt beautiful in it. During the party, many guests commented on the couple's story, Some still whispered about the bride's humble origins, but most had been won over by Melissa's dignity and intelligence. In his thank you speech, Nathan went straight to the point. Many of you know the story that brought us here. It was a story that began with injustice, passed through pain, but ended with love and redemption. Melissa taught me that a person's true worth is not in what they possess, but in who they are. And today I have the privilege of marrying the most valuable woman I know. Melissa also made a point of saying, "A few years ago I entered this hall wearing my best dress, which at the time seemed inadequate for the setting. Today I am here again, wearing what I chose to wear on the most important day of my life. The difference isn't in the clothes. The difference is in how we are treated and how we treat others. Thank you to everyone who supported us on this journey." The honeymoon was simple. A week at an inn in the Catskill Mountains. Nothing luxurious, just a quiet place where they could be alone and plan for the future. "Nathan, do you have any regrets?" asked Melissa one morning as they had coffee on the inn's porch. "Regrets about what?" "About marrying a woman with my past." "Melissa, your past is part of what makes you who you are. How could I regret that? But people will always remember." "Let people remember. Let them remember that my wife is the daughter of a courageous woman who was wronged, that she herself overcame all adversity, that she became a respected professional and an admirable person. I am proud of that story. Even knowing that some social circles will never fully accept us." "Melissa, the social circles that don't accept us are exactly the ones I don't want to be part of. I'd rather be rejected by the fake than accepted by the genuine." During the honeymoon, they made concrete plans for the future. Nathan wanted to expand the company's social projects. Melissa wanted to create a community clinic that would offer free medical care in underprivileged neighborhoods. "And about children?" asked Nathan one afternoon. "What about children? Do you want to have children?" "I do. And you?" "I really do. I want to raise children who grow up knowing that a person's value isn't measured by what they have, but by who they are. Who learn early on about justice, equality, respect." "Exactly. Nathan, yes, I think our children will have a beautiful story to tell about how their parents met. They sure will. A story about how love can be born from justice and how the truth can transform everything." 6 months after the wedding, Melissa discovered she was pregnant. The news was received with joy by the whole family. Margaret, who was now affectionately called Grandma Margaret, was especially emotional. "This baby represents a new generation," she would say. "A generation that will grow up without the prejudices and mistakes we made in the past." The baby was born on a sunny spring morning. It was a boy who was named Anthony Johnson Anderson, in honor of the grandfather he would never know and the great-grandmother who had been wronged. When Melissa held her son for the first time, she thought of her mother. "Look, Mom," she whispered. "Look how life can change. Your grandson will grow up in a family that learned to value the truth above all else." Nathan, standing by the bed, watched his wife and son with tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly. "Thank you for what?" "For teaching me what really matters in life, for showing me that true love can overcome any obstacle." "Nathan, we did this together. We turned a story of injustice into a story of love. And so, in the same golden hall where it had all begun with humiliation and tears, new life, true love, and hope for the future were now celebrated. The transformation was complete. The cleaning lady who was mocked for wearing an old dress to the party had become a wife, a mother, a respected professional, and a symbol that human dignity is independent of social origin. Nathan, the heir who was once blind to his own privileges, had become a conscious, fair man, passionate about a woman who taught him about courage. And Mrs. Margaret, the matriarch who had sacrificed an innocent to protect a guilty man, had found redemption by supporting the union that proved love can truly transform everything. Years later, when they told the story to their children, they would say it all started at a party where a simple woman was humiliated for her clothes, but where a young man recognized her true beauty. They would say that sometimes the greatest love stories are born from the greatest challenges, and that justice, when it finally arrives, can heal wounds from decades past. They would say that a person's worth is never measured by what they wear, but by what they carry in their heart, and that, in the end, true love always wins. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story of overcoming and love. Do you believe Melissa made the right decisions by forgiving and building a new life? And Nathan, did he really change, or was it just a momentary passion? Leave your honest opinion in the comments. I love reading what you think. If the story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one. Your company makes all the difference.